And now investigators are deploying new technology and analyzing other evidence, hoping for a breakthrough to bring Nancy home. Investigators are using a device known as a signal sniffer to try to detect signals from the 84-year-old's pacemaker.
40 minutes. That is how long the masked man was inside Nancy Guthrie's home in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona, on the night she disappeared. 40 minutes, wearing a full balaclava, carrying a backpack, holding a tactical flashlight in his mouth while he moved through the home of an 84-year-old woman in the middle of the night. And in those 40 minutes, according to former FBI Special Agent Jennifer Kidnapper, he did not just take Nancy, he executed a plan. A plan with specific components, specific equipment, and specific tactical decisions that a trained federal investigator can now look at and begin to read. The question this video is going to answer is not just what happened that night, it is what the tactics the kidnapper used tell us about who he is, how he prepared, and what investigators now know about the kind of person they are looking for. Jennifer Kidnapper is a former special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She has been one of the most consistently present and substantive expert voices on the Nancy Guthrie case since February, appearing across multiple major news platforms and offering analysis grounded in a career spent inside the institution she is now describing from the outside. She is not offering opinions from a distance. She is reading a scene the way her training taught her to read it, and what she has said publicly about the tactics visible in the available evidence from the night of January 31st into February 1st, 2026 is more specific and more revealing than most of the coverage of this case has acknowledged. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. She was reported missing from her home on the morning of February 1st, 2026. She is the mother of Savannah Guthrie, co-host of NBC's Today Show. She had dinner with family that evening, was dropped off at her home, went inside, and was never seen again. The call reporting her missing came the following morning. As of today, she has not been found. No suspect has been publicly identified by law enforcement. The investigation remains active, with both the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI confirmed as involved. What we do have, confirmed and on the public record, is doorbell camera footage from the night she disappeared. Footage that captured the suspect arriving at and entering the property. That footage has been analyzed frame by this community, by journalists, and by credentialed forensic and behavioral experts. And what it shows is not the image of someone acting on impulse. It shows someone who came prepared. The suspect was wearing a full balaclava, covering his entire face. He was carrying what has been identified as a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack, a Walmart private label brand backpack. He was wearing tactical gloves. He had a bite flashlight, a tactical flashlight designed to be held in the mouth to free both hands in his mouth during the time he was documented moving through the property. He arrived at a specific time. The doorbell camera went offline at 1:47 in the morning. At 2:12 in the morning, software detected a person on a camera inside the property. Nancy's pacemaker monitoring application disconnected from its system at 2:28 in the morning. Those timestamps are not random. They represent a sequence. And sequences, according to investigators trained to read them, tell a story about planning. Kidnapper has spoken directly about what the equipment visible in the doorbell footage communicates about the person who brought it. The balaclava is not a casual choice. It is a deliberate decision to ensure complete facial concealment throughout the entire operation, not just on approach, but inside the home for the entire 40 minutes he was there. The tactical gloves indicate awareness of the need to avoid leaving fingerprints on surfaces inside the property. The backpack of that specific size suggests he came with the capacity to carry items out of the home, whether those items were documents, valuables, or materials he needed for whatever came after. These are not the choices of someone who decided to do this the night before. This is the equipment list of someone who thought through what they needed and sourced it deliberately. The Ozark Trail Pack is a specific detail that has drawn attention from people following this case carefully. It is a Walmart brand. It is not a tactical or military supply purchase that would create a more traceable transaction. It is the kind of item that can be purchased in cash at any of hundreds of Walmart locations across Arizona and the broader Southwest without generating a record that connects directly to an identity. Choosing that specific brand at that specific price point from that specific retail category is itself a decision. It reflects a level of operational awareness about traceability that is not consistent with an impulsive or poorly planned act. Kidnapper noted that the suspect appeared to have specific knowledge of Nancy Guthrie's home, her schedule, and her neighborhood. He knew when she would be there. He knew the layout well enough to move through it in the dark with a flashlight in his mouth for 40 minutes without triggering an alarm or drawing attention from neighbors in the critical early window of the operation. He knew the doorbell camera was there because he disabled it or created the conditions under which it went offline before moving into the property. That knowledge does not come from nowhere. It comes from observation, from time spent in the neighborhood, from access to information about her routines, her property, her schedule, from someone who was watching before they acted. And this is where Kidnapper's analysis of the tactics becomes most significant for the investigation, because the preparation visible in the doorbell footage is not just evidence of what happened on the night of January 31st. It is evidence of what happened in the days and weeks before that night. Surveillance, route planning, equipment sourcing, timing decisions. All of it happened somewhere, involved someone, and left traces of its own. The FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, known as CAST, is reportedly processing cell tower data from the area around Nancy Guthrie's home, covering not just the night she disappeared, but the period before it. Every cell phone active in that neighborhood in the weeks leading up to February 1st was logged by nearby towers. A phone that appeared in that neighborhood multiple times in the days before the abduction, at hours inconsistent with normal residential traffic, would be exactly the kind of signal CAST is trained to identify and follow. The tactics the kidnapper used that night did not begin at 1:47 in the morning when the doorbell camera went offline. They began earlier, possibly days earlier, possibly weeks. And according to what Jennifer Kidnapper and other credentialed former federal agents have said publicly about this case, the FBI almost certainly already has a picture of that pre-operational period that the public has not yet seen. The question is, what that picture shows. And the answer to that question is why this investigation, 66 days in, has not yet produced a public arrest. The FBI does not announce what it knows. That is not a failure of the investigation, it is how federal cases are built. Evidence is gathered, verified, and assembled into a prosecutorial framework before any public move is made. A premature arrest that cannot be supported by a sufficiently developed evidentiary record does not just fail in court. It warns every other person connected to the operation that law enforcement is closing in. It gives people time to destroy evidence, cross borders, and coordinate stories. The FBI knows this. It is the reason the public record of this investigation has been so thin, despite the resources and attention directed at it. But the thinness of the public record does not mean the investigative record is equally thin. And what former federal agents have been willing to say on record about the specific tactics used the night Nancy Guthrie disappeared suggests that investigators are working with a profile of this kidnapper that is considerably more developed than anything that has been shared publicly. Jennifer Kidnapper told Fox News that the level of preparation visible in the doorbell footage points to someone with prior experience, either in law enforcement, military, or criminal operations requiring this kind of operational discipline. That is a specific and significant observation. A balaclava, tactical gloves, a bite flashlight, a deliberately chosen untraceable backpack, knowledge of the property layout, knowledge of the camera system, knowledge of the occupant's schedule, and the composure to spend 40 minutes inside that home without triggering a response from neighbors or a security system. That combination does not describe a first-time offender acting alone on instinct. Kidnapper was careful in how she framed this. She did not name a suspect. She did not speculate about specific identity. What she said is that the behavioral and equipment profile visible in the available evidence is consistent with someone who has operational experience of some kind. Someone who has been in situations requiring concealment, controlled movement under pressure, and awareness of surveillance systems before. That framing matters for the investigation because it narrows the field, not to a name, but to a category. And law enforcement working from a behavioral category combined with cell tower data, combined with the FBI's tire tread database work on the Circle driveway, combined with the DNA evidence still being processed at a laboratory in Florida, is working from multiple directions toward the same center point. Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent James Gagliano has spoken publicly about the investigative process in cases of this profile. He said that in a case where the suspect demonstrated this level of preparation, investigators would be building a timeline that extends backward from the night of the abduction, looking for the observable footprint that the preparation phase left behind. Sourcing the equipment, conducting surveillance on the property, establishing routes. Every one of those activities happens in the physical world, involves movement through spaces covered by cameras, and potentially involves transactions that generate records. The Ozark Trail backpack was purchased somewhere. The tactical gloves were purchased somewhere. The balaclava was purchased somewhere. If those purchases were made in cash at physical retail locations, investigators looking at surveillance footage from stores in the Tucson area in the weeks before February 1st cross-referenced against the physical description of the suspect from the doorbell footage are looking for the moment those items were acquired. That search is tedious, it is resource-intensive, and it is exactly the kind of sustained, unglamorous investigative work that the FBI does without announcing it. The cast cell tower analysis adds another dimension to the pre-operational picture. A retired FBI supervisory special agent told Fox News Digital that this team was likely processing mountains of cell tower data from the night of the abduction and beyond. But the backward extension of that analysis, looking at which phones appeared in the neighborhood around Nancy Guthrie's home in the days and weeks before February 1st, at hours that do not correspond to normal residential patterns, is where the surveillance phase of the operation would show up in the data. A person conducting surveillance on a property before an abduction returns to the area. They drive past, they park and observe. They time the occupant's routine. Each of those visits, if they were carrying a phone, generated a signal that was logged by the nearest cell tower. The cast team can map those signals. They can identify devices that appeared in that neighborhood repeatedly in the pre-operational period. And a device that appeared multiple times in the weeks before February 1st and then appeared again on the night of the abduction is not a coincidence the algorithm is going to miss. Now bring in a second confirmed evidentiary thread that connects directly to the tactics analysis: the pacemaker. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker monitoring application disconnected from its system at 2:28 in the morning on February 1st. That disconnection has been one of the most discussed details in this case since it was first reported. And the reason it matters for the tactics analysis is specific. A pacemaker monitoring application can disconnect for several reasons. The device moves out of range of its paired phone or home monitoring unit. The phone itself is powered off or removed from the premises. Or something happens to the person whose pacemaker is being monitored that disrupts the connection between the device and the system tracking it. At 2:28 in the morning, 16 minutes after software detected a person on a camera inside the property, Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker app went offline. Kidnapper and other analysts have noted that the timing of that disconnection relative to the camera detection at 2:12 is consistent with someone being moved. Moved away from the monitoring equipment paired to her pacemaker app. Moved out of range. Moved toward a vehicle. The sequence, camera detection at 2:12, pacemaker disconnection at 2:28, gives investigators a 16-minute window. 16 minutes between the moment someone was detected inside that home and the moment the medical monitoring connection that had been tracking Nancy Guthrie's cardiac device went dark. That 16-minute window is operationally specific. It is consistent with the time required to move someone from inside a home, through a door, across a driveway, and into a waiting vehicle. It is consistent with the circle driveway theory that former FBI Evidence Response Team agent Maureen O'Connell described in her analysis of the drone footage. It is consistent with a vehicle staged at the front of the property, engine running, positioned for immediate departure, with a driver who had been waiting for exactly this moment. The tactics visible in the doorbell footage, the preparation, the equipment, the timing, do not exist in isolation from the physical evidence. They connect to it. The balaclava connects to the absence of facial identification. The gloves connect to the absence of usable fingerprint evidence from inside the home. The backpack connects to the question of what was removed from the property that night. The pacemaker disconnection at 2:28 connects to the vehicle staging theory and the tire impressions in the decomposed granite of the circle driveway that O'Connell has been asking about since day 67. And then there is the DNA. The biological material recovered from inside Nancy Guthrie's home that Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed on February 19th contained the genetic profile of an unknown male. Someone with no documented reason to have been inside that house. That sample is currently at DNA Labs International in Florida. The deconvolution process, separating the unknown contributor's profile from a complex mixture that forensic genealogist C.C. Moore has described as containing multiple unknown contributors, has not yet produced a viable SNP profile suitable for genealogy database work. But Moore said something in her most recent public statements that connects directly to the tactics analysis in a way that has not been adequately discussed. She said the suspect almost certainly touched surfaces inside that home during his 40 minutes there. She pointed specifically to the bite flashlight. A person holding a flashlight in their mouth for any extended period will eventually take it out. The moment they do, saliva transfers to the outside of the glove. Saliva DNA is among the most reliable biological sources available to forensic analysts. If he removed that flashlight at any point during those 40 minutes, he left biological material on a surface in that house that may not have been collected on the first pass. Moore recommended that investigators return to the Guthrie home and re-swab, even after the property had been returned to the family. She said, DNA is hardy. It persists on surfaces longer than most people assume. A rootless hair invisible to the naked eye can be enough to build a case with the tools available today. That recommendation is sitting on the public record. Whether it has been acted on is a question the Pima County Sheriff's Department has not answered publicly. And given what former United States Surgeon General Richard Carmona said about the crime scene being permanently corrupted, given the no-confidence vote against Sheriff Nanos from within his own department, given the reporting that the sergeant initially placed in charge of the homicide unit had never personally investigated a homicide before this case, the question of whether every available forensic opportunity has been fully pursued is not a peripheral concern. It is the question at the center of everything. The tactics the kidnapper used were specific, practiced, and deliberate. The investigative response to those tactics has been uneven in ways that credentialed, named, on-record experts have documented publicly. And somewhere in the gap between what this kidnapper did and what investigators have confirmed they have found is the answer to where Nancy Guthrie is right now. There is one more development that ties everything in this analysis together. One thread that former federal agents say may be the most actionable lead currently sitting unused in this entire investigation. And it involves a Bitcoin wallet, more than 6 ransom contacts to a major national media outlet, and a federal law enforcement tactic with a specific name that Jennifer Coffindaffer used on the record to describe exactly what she believes should happen next. The Bitcoin wallet is empty. That is a confirmed fact, stated publicly by Harvey Levin, the founder of TMZ, on the record. Someone has been contacting TMZ about the Nancy Guthrie disappearance since the earliest weeks after she went missing. Not once. More than 6 separate contacts, making the same demand each time across weeks of an active federal investigation. Half a Bitcoin, deposited into a specific wallet address the sender provided. In exchange, implied information about Nancy Guthrie's location. No money has been deposited. The wallet has sat empty since the first contact arrived, and the person on the other side of those emails remains publicly unidentified. Jennifer Kidnapper looked at that situation and named exactly what she believes should happen. She called it by its federal law enforcement name: Tickle the Wire. Tickle the Wire is not a metaphor. It is a documented federal investigative strategy with a specific history in law enforcement practice. It originated in the context of wiretap operations, situations where investigators have a monitored communication channel, but the subject has gone quiet. Rather than waiting indefinitely for the subject to act on their own, investigators introduce a deliberate stimulus on the monitored channel. They give the subject a reason to respond. And in responding, in doing what they naturally do when the thing they are watching changes, the subject reveals themselves. In the context of the Nancy Guthrie ransom contacts, the wire is the blockchain. The Bitcoin wallet address the sender provided to TMZ is a publicly observable address on a permanently recorded public ledger. Every transaction that ever occurs on that wallet is visible in real time to anyone who knows how to look, including law enforcement equipped with the blockchain analytics infrastructure the FBI has been using to trace cryptocurrency in federal cases for over a decade. The tickle is the deposit. You put the half Bitcoin in the wallet. You give the sender exactly what they asked for, and then you watch what happens on the wire. Kidnapper explained the mechanics of this to Newsweek with precision. Bitcoin is regularly described in popular culture as anonymous currency. That reputation is dramatically overstated in the modern federal investigative environment. Creating a Bitcoin wallet does not require a name or any form of identity verification. The anonymity exists at the wallet creation level. But the moment the Bitcoin moves toward utility, the moment the sender tries to convert it into spendable currency, that anonymity collapses. She put it in 11 words to Newsweek. Do they take it? Do they convert it to pesos? It is internationally tracked. Any conversion from Bitcoin into spendable money passes through a regulated exchange. Regulated exchanges operating under federal and international compliance requirements collect and maintain identity records: name, government-issued identification, bank account information, physical address. Law enforcement serves legal process on that exchange. The exchange produces the records. A name appears. The trail does not require the sender to be careless. It does not require them to make a mistake. It only requires them to do the one thing they have been demanding the right to do for 2 months: take the money. Modern blockchain analytics firms, including companies whose working relationships with federal law enforcement agencies are documented in court records and federal procurement databases, have built software systems that track Bitcoin across hundreds of thousands of wallets simultaneously. Funds can move through dozens of intermediate wallets in an attempt to obscure the trail. The chain of transactions remains intact and followable at every step. Every address is documented. Every timestamp is captured. Every amount is precise. The blockchain does not forget, and it does not lie. Here is the legal reality that sits beneath this entire situation and needs to be stated plainly. The person sending those ransom contacts to TMZ has already committed a federal crime. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 875, which addresses interstate threats and demands transmitted in interstate commerce, it is a federal crime to transmit communications demanding money connected to a person's welfare or safety. Email is interstate commerce under the statute. Cryptocurrency is value under the statute. More than 6 such communications across weeks of an active federal investigation is a sustained course of criminal conduct. The criminal exposure was created the moment the first email was sent. It was compounded every time the sender chose to come back. Critically, the statute does not require that the sender have any actual information about Nancy Guthrie's location. It does not require that they have any connection to what happened on the night of January 31st. The criminal conduct is complete at the moment of transmission. 6 times over. A conviction under these statutes can mean years in federal prison. And the prosecutorial interest in pursuing charges against someone who ran a sustained extortion campaign targeting a high-profile, active federal missing persons investigation would be real and immediate. Kidnapper's recommendation is not contingent on whether the sender knows where Nancy is. She told Newsweek directly that she does not believe the ransom note sender necessarily has real information about Nancy's location. And she still said the tactic should be deployed, because identifying the sender closes an open loop that has been sitting in this investigation for more than 2 months. It either connects to something larger, a person with peripheral knowledge, a connection to someone adjacent to the case, a fragment of information that surfaces in a cooperation context when federal charges are on the table, or it convicts someone of the federal crimes they have already committed. Both outcomes serve the investigation. Both outcomes serve the case. There is one more dimension to this that Kidnapper raised, and that deserves to be understood clearly. When someone faces federal extortion charges, when they are looking at real consequences and considering their options, cooperation becomes meaningful. If the sender has any information at all, any secondhand knowledge, any fragment of context they picked up from someone connected to this case, that information surfaces in a cooperation discussion in ways it never would otherwise. The identification does not foreclose other investigative paths. It opens them. The wire has not been tickled. That is what the empty wallet confirms. Whether that reflects a strategic decision by the FBI that has not been made public, a legal constraint, an investigative sequencing choice, or something else entirely, we cannot know from outside the investigation. We do not have access to the internal deliberations of the federal investigators working this case. What we can say, grounded entirely in confirmed public statements from named sources, is that a former FBI special agent publicly recommended a specific named federal tactic, explained the mechanism, explained the rationale, and explained why the outcome is valuable, regardless of what the sender knows. And the wallet is still empty. That gap is a legitimate subject for public scrutiny, not accusation, not conspiracy. Public scrutiny of the kind that asks directly whether every available tool is being used in an investigation that has now run for more than 66 days without a publicly confirmed resolution. This community has earned the right to ask that question loudly, because this community has been doing the work. Independent investigators have walked washes in the Tucson sun and found clothing that formal search operations missed. Forensic analysts have identified behavioral markers in the doorbell footage that law enforcement has not publicly addressed. Former federal agents have named specific tactics on the record that have not been visibly deployed. The community has been ahead of the public record on this case repeatedly and consistently. That pattern matters. In missing persons investigations that achieve the level of sustained public engagement this case has generated, community pressure on investigative institutions has made documented differences in resource allocation, in investigative prioritization, in the willingness of witnesses to come forward. Staying loud, staying specific, and staying grounded in confirmed facts is not just engagement. It is advocacy for Nancy Guthrie and for the answers her family has been waiting 66 days to receive. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. The kidnapper used specific tactics that night, tactics that a trained federal investigator can read and analyze and use to build a behavioral profile of who he is and how he prepared. The FBI has tools, confirmed and documented tools, that can follow the traces those tactics left behind. The blockchain trail is waiting. The cell tower data is being processed. The forensic opportunities identified by named, credentialed experts are on the public record. What do you think should happen next? Should the FBI deploy the tickle-the-wire strategy and make the Bitcoin deposit? Do you believe the ransom sender has real information about where Nancy is? Or are they someone who has been following the coverage and saw an opportunity? Leave your answer in the comments, because this community's analysis has consistently been ahead of what official channels have shared publicly, and that is not going to change. If you are not subscribed to this channel, now is the moment. Every confirmed development in the Nancy Guthrie investigation gets covered here as it happens, with named sources, with documented facts, and with the kind of sustained analytical attention this case demands. Nancy Guthrie is not forgotten. The questions are not going away, and this channel will be here for every answer when it comes. This video is produced for informational and educational purposes only. All facts presented as confirmed are sourced from named, on-record public statements and published mainstream media reporting. Jennifer Coffindoffer's statements cited in this video were made by her publicly to Newsweek and Fox News and reflect her own expert analysis. They do not represent the confirmed positions or plans of the FBI, the Pima County Sheriff's Department, or any other law enforcement agency. Harvey Levin's statements cited in this video were made publicly on behalf of TMZ. No individual has been named or implied as a suspect in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. All analytical content has been explicitly labeled as analysis throughout. If you have information related to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, please contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department or submit a tip directly to the FBI at tips.fbi.gov.